Look at what smells, man. Oh my god. Let's come through the door. Alright.
Despite being cold and abundant with snow, Antarctica is one of the most dangerous places on Earth to have a fire. Being one of the driest and windiest places, it makes it easy for fire to flame fast, plus the lack of liquid water will make it hard to put out. Almost all research stations are isolated, so if one burns down, it basically means their life support has ended for the group of scientists living there. This nightmare scenario happened intentionally in the Argentine Brown Station. This is a first-hand account sent by email on an Antarctica news website. Sometime in October, at a very late hour, one of my buddies and I were walking from the PO club and noticed smoke coming from the chapel. He ran back to the club and notified the firehouse, who were on the scene within 3 minutes. While he was doing this, I was able to get inside and pull some of the pews away from the fire, and when my buddy returned, we were able to pull a rug that was in flames out the back door before the firemen arrived. Fortunately, only a small portion of the interior was damaged and was rebuilt the following summer. After the fire was put out, the fireman could not find a cause and were baffled. It was the next day that we found out it was actually an attempted arson committed by one of our winter over friends who had become intoxicated and chose to commit this act in order to be flown out quicker than he had been originally scheduled. Another buddy of mine had seen him run out of the chapel, but did not see any smoke or flames, and thought nothing of it at the time, so he went to his quarters. I did not choose to reveal the arsonist's name, seeing how this was an occurrence of 20 years ago. I can tell you now that he was a naval first-class officer, who got his wish, and was flown out at first flight, and was flown directly back to the States where he was charged. I do not know the outcome of the charges. A feud had been boiling for many months in the Russian Belingshausen station. Two men, Sergei Savitsky and Oleg Belugazov, had been arguing for months, often while intoxicated. This confining environment of the research station amplified this quarrelling. Savitsky was on the verge of an emotional breakdown, often finding solace in the books from the station's library. After both drinking, Belugazov had spoiled the ending of many books that Savitsky was reading. This was it. This pushed Savitsky over. After months of bickering, this broke the camel's back. He proceeded to stab Belugazov many times in the chest. Belugazov was flown to a Chilean hospital, and Savitsky surrendered himself and was flown back to Russia for house arrest. Belugazov recovered as Savitsky waited for his trial, but Belugazov forgave Savitsky, and the trial was dropped. The most infamous crime story in the icy desert occurs in the Vostok station. This station, in Princess Elizabeth Land, is one of the most remote stations in Antarctica. 3,488 meters above sea level and malefically cold, this station is prone to the inhabitants falling ill. Acclimatization to the station can take up to 2 months, with effects like suffocation and extreme weight loss. All these new stresses can take a toll on the human mind. A small disagreement can lead to an explosive fight in isolation. Two Russian scientists were playing chess. With each move one of the scientists made, the other became increasingly enraged. Tension rose as the game progressed. One scientist made the winning move. Checkmate. This victory ended quickly, as the other scientist was so maddened he attacked the other player with an ice axe. It is unknown whether the victim survived. As many different sources say, he was either badly injured or he died. For a period of time, chess was banned in all Russian stations in Antarctica. In the Amundsen Scott station, a man named Rodney Marks ran back and forth to the station doctors. He had signs of fever and stomach pains that didn't seem to be going away. The next day, May 12th, he died. Unfortunately, As it was the height of winter in Antarctica, his body could not be transported from the station. Instead, his body was kept in a freezer for 6 months. It was thought to be of natural causes. Yet, 6 months later, when his body was flown to New Zealand, an autopsy was conducted and found he had died from methanol poisoning. The uncovering of this poisoning left the case in a contested state. According to The Guardian, it was an open secret that Marks had an alcohol problem, which had been thought to be a way to cover his Tourette's, so many concluded that he had brewed his own alcohol and overdosed. This was unlikely, as alcohol was available at the station at any time. It wasn't a drug overdose either, as investigators thought. Marks did have needle punctures up his arms, but no trace of illicit drugs were found in the system. An investigator said he had no financial worries and he was striving towards the completion of a significant piece of academic work. He was also known to be sociable, so suicide seemed unlikely. What makes this case more confusing is the lack of response from the other station members. When the head investigator reached out to the other 49 members in the base, only 13 had responded. No record of the station's doctor could be found after 2006. A plausible explanation is that Rodney Marks was intentionally poisoned. What I question most while researching these cases is who enforces the laws in Antarctica. How are crimes prosecuted? The population comprises mainly scientists, plumbers, electricians and cooks, but no formal police force. There are army stations to their respective countries, but they are used to take people in and out of Antarctica, not for imposition. In 1959, 53 nations signed the Antarctica Treaty, which under crimes states that any person who commits a crime is subject to punishment by their own country. Simple enough. It starts to get entangled when one considers the claimed territories from the individual countries. You may have seen a map like this, slices of Antarctica, each showing a country's sovereignty. The problem is that these maps are not consistent. Territories overlap, and countries don't recognise each other's claims. This makes the process of prosecution and crime work ever more complicated. What would happen if a Russian scientist killed a British scientist in a Norwegian territory? Dr. Alan Hemmings, an expert in Antarctica governance, stated, "An example would be a US citizen is subject to US laws and prosecution in a US station. But if the dead person and the alleged murderer are different states and don't recognise each other's claim, and most don't, particularly if the critical events occur away from anybody's station, say at a campsite, then it won't be necessarily clear who has jurisdiction." Take the Rodney Marks case for instance. Rodney Marks was an Australian man living in an American research station. After he died, his body was sent to New Zealand, where New Zealand investigators tried to solve this crime. A few months of this investigation went by, and nothing seemed likely. Then American investigators came to the station. Rather than working with the New Zealand force, these American investigators withheld information from the New Zealand team and the public. Whether this lack of collaboration affected the closing of this case is uncertain. Rodney Marks' family states that opening the case again a few years after his death would be a fruitless exercise. A universally unclaimed area of Antarctica is Marie Byrd's Land, and is the largest area of unclaimed land on Earth. Even by Antarctica standards, it is a remote and unforgiving environment to live in. Only a handful of expeditions have taken place here. With it being unclaimed, could you commit a crime here and not be prosecuted? Could someone drag someone else to this land and murder them? We don't know. Yet.